My family didn't just abandon me. They tried to erase me. They removed my name from family businesses, told relatives I had left them, convinced people I was a failure, and even tried to make sure I would never inherit a single thing from the family I had helped build. My own father told everyone that I was dead to him. My brother celebrated when I disappeared. My mother begged me not to embarrass the family by fighting back. So I did something none of them expected. I walked away. I disappeared completely. For 7 years, they heard nothing from me. They assumed I was broke. They assumed I was alone. They assumed I had failed somewhere far away and was too ashamed to come home. They were wrong. I had built a company worth hundreds of millions of dollars. I had become one of the most recognizable entrepreneurs in my industry. And when I finally returned to my hometown, my family didn't recognize the man stepping out of the black SUV. They only recognized me when I walked into the boardroom, placed a folder on the table, and told them I now owned the company they had spent years using to erase me. My name is Ethan Carter. And once upon a time, my family made me believe that I didn't matter. I grew up in Raleigh, North Carolina, in a family that cared deeply about appearances. My father, Richard Carter, owned a regional construction and development company. It wasn't a massive corporation, but it was successful. He had built it from the ground up. By the time I was a teenager, Carter Development owned commercial properties, apartment buildings, warehouses, and several construction contracts across North Carolina. My older brother Jason was the golden child. He was everything my father wanted in a son. Confident, aggressive, competitive. He could walk into a room and make everyone believe he belonged there. I was different. I was quiet. I liked computers. I liked numbers. I liked solving problems. While Jason spent weekends at country clubs with Dad, I spent mine in the garage taking apart old computers and putting them back together. My father used to say, "Ethan, you're too comfortable hiding behind a screen." I didn't mind. I wasn't hiding. I was learning. When I was 21, I built my first piece of software. It was a simple system for construction companies to track materials, labor, schedules, and expenses. I showed it to my father. He barely looked at it. He said, "The real business is construction, Ethan." I asked, "What if technology changes construction?" He laughed. "Then someone else can worry about it." Jason laughed too. I didn't argue. I kept working. Over the next few years, I built better versions. I started selling the software to small contractors. At first, I made almost nothing. Then I made enough to quit my job. Then I hired 2 employees. Then 5. Then 15. My father still didn't take me seriously. Jason started calling my company Ethan's Little Computer Project. I ignored him. Then something happened that changed everything. A large national construction company signed a contract with us. The contract was worth $3.2 million. Suddenly, people were interested. Investors started calling. Other construction companies wanted our software. My little project wasn't little anymore. I was building a technology company that could change the construction industry. And that's when my family suddenly became interested. My father invited me to dinner. Jason was there. My mother was there. My father poured me a drink. He said, "I've been thinking." I smiled. That usually means trouble. Jason laughed. My father ignored the joke. He said, "Your software could be useful to the family business." I asked, "How?" "We could integrate it into Carter Development." I said, "That could work." Then he gave me a proposal. Carter Development would invest in my company. In return, the family would receive a controlling interest. I refused. My father looked surprised. I explained that I wanted to build the technology independently. He said, "We're family." I said, "Exactly. That's why I don't want business to destroy our relationship." Jason laughed. You think you're better than us now? I looked at him. No. He said, then why won't you work with Dad? Because I want to build my own company. My father became angry. You're making a mistake. Maybe I was. But I didn't accept the deal. 3 months later, everything changed. Our company received another major investment. Then another. Our valuation crossed $40 million. I was 28 years old. For the first time, my father couldn't pretend I was playing around. Then Jason approached me privately. He said, we should work together. I asked, why? He said, because Dad isn't going to live forever. I didn't like the way he said it. I asked, what does that mean? He smiled. Nothing. I ignored it. I shouldn't have. A few weeks later, I received an email from my company's legal department. Someone had tried to access confidential financial information. Then someone tried to access our client database. Then one of our investors received anonymous claims that my company was hiding financial problems. None of it was true, but the timing was suspicious. I hired an outside cybersecurity firm. They found the source. The attacks were coming from an IP address connected to an employee at Carter Development, my family's company. I confronted my father. He denied everything. Jason denied everything. My mother told me I was being paranoid. Then I discovered something worse. Someone had created documents showing that my company had received unauthorized loans from Carter Development. The documents contain my signature, but I hadn't signed them. Someone was creating a paper trail that made it look like my company was financially dependent on my family. I went to my attorney. He told me something I never expected. Ethan, someone is trying to establish control. I asked, over what? Your company. My stomach dropped. I started investigating. Then I found the connection. Jason had created a holding company. That holding company had been quietly buying shares in companies that had business relationships with mine. And several of those companies had connections to my father's business. Jason wasn't trying to destroy me. He was trying to surround me. He wanted to force me into a sale. And if I refused, he planned to make my company look unstable. I confronted him. He didn't deny it. He said, you're making this bigger than it is. I said, you're trying to take my company. He smiled. I'm trying to protect the family. I said, from what? From you. I couldn't believe him. He continued. Dad built everything. You don't get to come along with your little technology company and act like you're the future of the family. I said, I never asked to be part of the family business. He replied, that's the problem. I didn't understand. Then he said something that explained everything. Dad wants me to inherit everything. There it was. The truth. Jason wasn't afraid that I would fail. He was afraid that I would succeed. Because if I succeeded, Dad couldn't pretend Jason was the only son capable of carrying the family legacy. I walked away. I decided to protect my company. I moved assets, changed legal structures, rebuilt our board, secured independent financing. And for a while it worked. Until my father made his move. He called a family meeting. Everyone was there. My parents, Jason, my sister Emily, and me. My father placed a stack of documents on the table. He said, we need to discuss Ethan. I looked at him. What's wrong? He said, your behavior. I almost laughed. My behavior. He said I was becoming arrogant. He said I was embarrassing the family. He said I had become obsessed with money. Jason sat there quietly. Then my father said the words that changed my life. You are no longer welcome in this family business. I stared at him. don't work for you. He said, that's not the point. Then what is? He pushed the documents toward me. They were legal notices. My name was being removed from several family trusts. My access to family properties was revoked. My name was being removed from certain family records. I looked at him. You're doing this because I won't give you my company. He didn't answer. My mother started crying. She said, Ethan, please don't make this worse. I looked at her. I'm not the one doing this. My father stood. You have one chance. For what? Come back under the family business. I said, and give you control of my company. Yes. I laughed. He didn't. Then he said something I'll never forget. If you walk out that door, you're no longer my son. The room went silent. I looked at my mother. She wouldn't look at me. I looked at Jason. He smiled. That smile told me everything. My father had already chosen. So I stood. I walked to the door. Before I left, I turned around. I said, you should be careful what you erase. My father said, what does that mean? I smiled. Nothing. Then I left. The next morning, my father publicly announced that I had left the family business. He told relatives that I had become difficult. He told people I was obsessed with money. He said I had chosen business over family. Then Jason started telling people that I had lost control of my company. It was all lies. But my family believed them. Some relatives stopped calling. Family friends stopped inviting me to events. People who had known me since childhood suddenly treated me like I was a stranger. Then my mother sent me a message. Please don't fight your father, just leave. I stared at that message for a long time. Then I deleted it. I didn't fight. I didn't defend myself. I didn't explain anything. I disappeared. I moved my headquarters to Austin. I changed my phone number. I stopped attending family events. I stopped talking to relatives. I didn't post about my life. I didn't announce what I was doing. I became invisible. And that's exactly what they wanted. For the first year, it was difficult. I missed my mother. I missed my sister. I even missed Jason sometimes. Not because I forgave him. Because he was my brother. But I didn't go back. Instead, I built. My company expanded. We entered new markets. We developed artificial intelligence tools for construction planning. We created predictive systems for material costs. We built software that could analyze project delays before they happened. Our clients grew from hundreds to thousands. Our valuation went from $40 million to $100 million. Then $250 million. Then $500 million. I became a recognizable name in the industry. Magazines started interviewing me. Business conferences invited me to speak. Investors wanted meetings. I appeared on television. I became known as the entrepreneur who had revolutionized construction technology. And through all of it, my family knew nothing. They assumed I was struggling. Jason occasionally asked mutual friends about me. I never responded. Then one day, I saw an article about Carter Development. The company was struggling. My father's real estate investments had gone badly. Several projects were over-leveraged. Jason had taken control of the company. And he had made things worse. He had borrowed heavily to expand. The debt was enormous. I read the article twice. Then I closed it. I wasn't interested in revenge. Not anymore. Until my CFO walked into my office. He said, "We have an acquisition opportunity." I asked, "What kind?" He placed a folder on my desk. Carter Development. I froze. I looked at him. Who owns the debt? He said, "Several banks and private lenders." What's the total? He gave me the number. It was enormous. But my company could afford it. I asked, why would we buy it? He explained. Carter Development owned several strategically important properties. Warehouses, commercial buildings, industrial land. Some of the assets were worth far more than the debt. It was a good investment. I asked him to investigate everything. He did. Then he came back. The company is vulnerable. I looked at him. How vulnerable? If the lenders demand repayment, they could lose control. I stared at the folder. Then I said something that surprised even me. Let's buy the debt. My CFO looked confused. You're sure? I said, yes. We spent months acquiring positions. One lender at a time. One property at a time. Quietly. Legally. Without anyone knowing who was behind the purchases. By the time Carter Development realized what was happening, we controlled enough debt to influence the company's future. Then Jason made a desperate move. He announced a major expansion. He planned to acquire a technology company to modernize Carter Development. That technology company was one of my competitors. I smiled when I saw the announcement. He was trying to become what I had become. But he didn't know I had already surpassed him. Then my board approved the final acquisition. We would acquire controlling interests in Carter Development's debt and assets. The deal would effectively give us control of the company. I didn't tell my family. I wanted them to find out in the boardroom. The meeting was scheduled for Monday morning. I flew to Raleigh Sunday night. I hadn't been home in 7 years. I stayed at a hotel. I didn't tell anyone I was there. Monday morning, I arrived at the Carter Development headquarters. Security stopped me. I gave them my name. The guard looked at the list. Then he looked at me. Mr. Carter. Yes. Which Mr. Carter? I smiled. Ethan. His face changed. He recognized me. He whispered, "Oh." I said, "Is there a problem?" He shook his head. "No, sir." The elevator doors opened. I walked inside. When I entered the boardroom, my father was sitting at the head of the table. Jason was beside him. They were reviewing financial documents. My father looked up. His face went completely white. Jason stared at me. He didn't recognize me immediately. I had changed. I wore a tailored suit. I had a different haircut. I carried myself differently. I wasn't the 28-year-old they had thrown out. I was 35. Confident. Successful. And completely independent. My father whispered, "Ethan." I sat down. "Hello, Dad." Jason stood. "What are you doing here?" I placed a folder on the table. "Business." My father looked at the folder. "What business?" I said, "The business you tried to erase me from." Jason grabbed the folder. He opened it. His hands started shaking. I watched his face change. He looked at my attorney. Then at his attorney. Then at me. "No." I said nothing. He turned another page. "No." My father grabbed the papers. He read them. Then he looked at me. "You bought the debt." "Yes." "How?" I smiled. Quietly. Jason shouted, "You planned this." I shook my head. "No." He stared at me. I said, "You did this to yourselves." My father couldn't speak. Then I told them the part they couldn't believe. My company was now valued at more than $600 million. We had clients across the country. We had offices in 6 cities. And I had become one of the most recognized entrepreneurs in the construction technology industry. Jason stared at me. "You're worth that much." I said, "More." My father looked devastated. He asked, "Why didn't you tell us?" I looked at him. "You told me I wasn't your son anymore." Silence. Then I said, "I believed you." My mother wasn't in the room. I didn't want her there. This wasn't about humiliating her. This was about confronting the people who had tried to erase me. Jason said, "You're going to take the company." I looked at him. "No." He looked relieved. Then I continued, "I'm going to restructure it." His relief disappeared. I said, "The company is over-leveraged. Your expansion strategy failed. The debt is unsustainable, but the assets are valuable." My father stared at me. "What do you want?" I slid another document across the table. "I'll protect the employees." Jason said, "And us." I looked at him. "You'll have an opportunity to leave." My father said, "You're firing me." I said, "No." I paused. "You fired yourself 7 years ago." He looked down. That sentence hurt him. I could see it. But I wasn't finished. I told them I would preserve the company. I would keep the employees. I would protect the properties. I would pay the legitimate creditors. But the family would no longer control Carter Development. My father asked, "And what happens to the name?" I looked at him. "I'm keeping it." Jason looked furious. "Why?" I said, "Because Grandpa built it." My father looked at me. For the first time that morning, his anger disappeared. He looked ashamed. Grandpa had been the person who originally helped my father start the company. And Grandpa had always believed I would eventually build something bigger. I hadn't thought about that in years. The meeting lasted 4 hours. By the end, the deal was done. Carter Development was no longer controlled by my father. It was now part of my company's portfolio. The company my family had used to erase me was now under my control. But I didn't destroy it. I rebuilt it. I brought in new leadership. I paid employees who had been waiting months for bonuses. I renegotiated contracts. I sold failing projects. I kept profitable properties. And within 18 months, Carter Development became profitable again. My father watched from the outside. Jason started another company. This time, he had to build it without family money. My mother eventually contacted me. She asked if I would come home. I hesitated. Then I agreed. When I arrived, she opened the door. She looked at me for a long time. Then she hugged me. I didn't move at first. Then I hugged her back. She cried. "I thought you hated us." I said, "I didn't hate you." "Then why did you disappear?" I looked at her. "Because you asked me to." She started crying harder. "I didn't mean forever." I said, "You should have said that." She wiped her eyes. "I was afraid." "Of Dad?" She nodded. "Of Jason." I said, "And me?" She shook her head. "No." I looked away. She said, "I knew you were different." I smiled. "Different isn't bad." She nodded. "I know that now." Then she asked the question I knew was coming. "Are you happy?" I thought about it. 7 years earlier, I would have answered with money. Now I didn't. I said, "I'm free." She smiled through tears. "That's good." My father took longer. Months later, he finally asked to meet me. We met at the same restaurant where he had once told me I was no longer his son. He sat across from me. He looked older, smaller. For a while, he didn't speak. Then he said, "You became everything I thought you couldn't be." I smiled. "No." He looked confused. I continued. "I became everything I wanted to be." He stared at me. That hurt him more than anything I could have said. Then he asked, Do you hate me? No. Why? I said, because I don't want to carry you around for the rest of my life. He looked down. I was wrong. Yes. I chose Jason. Yes. I tried to erase you. Yes. He looked at me. And you still kept the company. I nodded. Because Grandpa built it. He smiled sadly. Of course. Then he asked, can you forgive me? I thought for a moment. I can forgive you. He looked relieved. But I can't give you back the role you had in my life. He nodded. I understand. That was the first honest conversation we'd had in years. We didn't become best friends. We didn't suddenly become the perfect father and son. But we stopped pretending. And sometimes, honesty is the first form of peace. A year later, I attended a major business conference in New York. Thousands of people were there. The host introduced me. Please welcome Ethan Carter, founder and CEO of Carter Technologies. The crowd applauded. I walked onto the stage. I looked out at the audience. And for a moment, I thought about that 28-year-old version of myself. The one my family had called arrogant. The one they had called selfish. The one they had tried to erase. I thought about my father's words. You're no longer my son. Then I looked at the crowd. And I smiled. The host asked me, what was the hardest part of becoming successful? I could have talked about money, competition, investors, failure. Instead, I said something else. The hardest part was learning that sometimes the people who tell you you're not enough are the people you love most. The audience became quiet. I continued. You can spend years trying to prove them wrong. I paused. But eventually, you have to stop. The host asked, why? I said, because your life isn't supposed to be a courtroom where you're constantly defending your worth. The audience applauded. I continued. Build because you believe in what you're building. Work because you love the work. Become successful because you want to create something meaningful. Not because you want revenge. That was the truth I had learned. I thought revenge would be controlling the company. It wasn't. I thought revenge would be making my father regret abandoning me. It wasn't. I thought revenge would be watching Jason lose everything. It wasn't. The real victory was becoming someone who no longer needed any of them to recognize my value. My family tried to erase me. They removed my name. They rewrote my story. They told people I had failed. They thought disappearing meant losing. But they misunderstood. I wasn't disappearing. I was building in silence. And when I finally came back, I didn't return as the son they had thrown away. I returned as a man they couldn't control. Rich, successful, recognized, and financially independent. But untouchable wasn't about money. It wasn't about lawyers. It wasn't about power. It meant they couldn't take my identity from me anymore. They couldn't decide whether I was worthy. They couldn't define success for me. They couldn't erase what I had built. And they couldn't make me beg for a place at their table. Because I had built my own. Years later, my mother asked me something. She said, if you could go back to that night when Dad told you to leave, would you do anything differently? I thought about it. Then I said, yes. She looked surprised. What? I would leave sooner. She laughed through tears. I laughed too. Because she understood. That night had felt like the end of my family. But it was actually the beginning of my life. The family that tried to erase me accidentally gave me the one thing I had never had. Freedom. I didn't have to live under my father's shadow. I didn't have to compete with Jason. I didn't have to defend my choices. I didn't have to ask permission. I could fail. I could succeed. I could start over. and nobody could tell me who I was. So yes, my family tried to erase me. They thought they were destroying me. They thought I would come crawling back. They thought I would disappear forever. Instead, I disappeared long enough to become someone they couldn't recognize. And when I came back, I didn't come back begging. I came back owning the company they thought belonged to them. I came back with a business worth hundreds of millions. I came back with my name on buildings, magazines, contracts, and conference stages. But the greatest thing I came back with wasn't money. It was peace. Because I finally understood something my younger self never could. You don't have to make people regret losing you. You just have to become someone you are proud of becoming. My family tried to erase me. Then I came back rich, famous, and untouchable. But in the end, the most powerful thing I owned wasn't their company. It was my own life. And this time, nobody was taking it away.